In the paddock, the discussion continues about the future of Ferrari and the technical direction to take in view of the new regulatory cycle. Juan Pablo Montoya is very critical and straightforward. According to the former Colombian driver, the prancing horse should stop building the single-seater around Charles Leclerc and start tailoring it for Lewis Hamilton. If you enjoy the videos, please hit like to show your support. Let's dive right in. Despite the Monegasque is having what, according to Frédéric Vasseur himself, is his best season in Formula 1, often driving beyond the limits of a technically deficient Scuderia Ferrari, 25 Montoya expressed a clear position during his podcast Montoya S, produced by AS Colombia. At the moment, Ferrari is not focusing on the US, but if they want to be competitive in 2025, they need to develop the next car, taking into account mainly his needs, not those of Charles, the single-seaters suitable for Leclerc. They might win a few races, but they can't secure a world championship. Montoya insists on the value of Hamilton's experience, emphasizing how with a competitive car, the 7-time world champion can quickly find the right direction for development. Thanks to his technical reading ability and clarity in instructions to the team, Lewis knows exactly what is needed to improve a car, he added. But he also raised a doubt about the internal environment of Maranello. It's a complex political environment that probably surprised Hamilton. He thought that at Ferrari everything he wanted would be done for who he is and for what he represents. But people's ego is always a complicated factor to manage. So the conclusion is clear. If Ferrari really wants to fight for the title again, it can't afford another neutral development. A choice is needed from Camponetta, and for Montoya that choice is called Hamilton. Mattia Binotto has spoken about Ferrari again, and once again he did not choose half measures after more than 30 years within the team. The former team principal has coolly commented on the current situation in Maranello and the arrival of Lewis Hamilton, implying that for him this choice does not represent a strategically sensible move for the future. Binotto led Ferrari from 2019 to 2022, simultaneously holding the roles of team principal and technical director with a strongly centralizing approach. A management that has seen moments of growth, but also technical and political choices often controversial. With a project that has already produced interesting results in 2025 compared to the mere 4 points collected in 2024. The Swiss team has already quadrupled their haul after just 9 races, showing concrete signs of operational progress, especially in pit stops and race management. In parallel, Binotto observes from afar what is happening in Maranello and does not spare criticism. He openly stated that he would never hire Hamilton, considering him a driver with an extraordinary career, but now at sunset. He implied it's too late. While useful years ago, today it's a symbolic, not functional choice. And his position became even clearer after what happened in the Spanish Grand Prix. Seeing a Sauber, that of Hülkenberg, overtake on track the Scuderia Ferrari, 25 of Hamilton, even with problems restarting from the safety car, gave the impression of a technical paradox. In the comparison between present and future, Binotto has no doubts Hamilton represents the past, while Max Verstappen is the driver every team should bet on. He is the absolute reference, the most complete, the one everyone would want in their box. He reiterated, implicitly emphasizing that Ferrari should focus on a long-term project with a young and technically incisive leader. Yet, unlike other former Ferrari members who preferred not to comment publicly after leaving Maranello, like Alison Costa or Stella Binotto, he has always maintained a direct and critical relationship with the Ferrari world. Perhaps because the separation was not peaceful, or maybe because he still has something to say. While Audi is preparing for its debut in 2026, taking advantage of the regulatory reset to close the technical gap with the more established teams, Binotto shows that the experience gained in Maranello can be useful in other contexts. And while Hamilton is still trying to find his footing within Scuderia Ferrari, 25 that doesn't seem to suit his style, the former engineer of the Rosa sends a clear message. New ideas are needed, but also the right people at the right time. According to him, Hamilton has already passed that moment. Lewis Hamilton's debut in Ferrari remains a hot topic in the paddock. After the first 9 races of 2025, the 7-time world champion still struggles to adapt to an Scuderia Ferrari 25 that seems far from his ideal driving style. But there are those, like Carlos Sainz, who know well the internal dynamics at Maranello and wanted to defend his former boxing rival. In an interview given to Mundo Deportivo, the Spaniard, now a Williams driver, wanted to make clear how complex it is, even for great champions, to quickly integrate into a new team. Changing teams is never easy. I've done it 5 times in my career, and each time I had to fight against the idea that a driver should be immediately competitive. Expectations are very high, but the reality is different. Sainz cited well-known cases like Daniel Ricciardo at Renault and then at McLaren, where the difficulties of adaptation were underestimated, just like what's happening today with Hamilton. It's not about finding excuses, but about correctly interpreting a process that requires time, knowledge of the medium, and full harmony with the technical environment. Now that even a 7-time world champion is struggling, he added, perhaps many are beginning to understand what I was saying years ago, speaking from my own personal experience. Sainz has returned to 2022, a year in which he struggled with the new technical regulations introduced in Formula 1. The initial races were challenging. The assertive cornering technique, defined by a firm application of the brakes, the steering, did not match well with the Ferrari's front axle, but over time he managed to find the key. Mid-season, I found the square pole at Silverstone Austin Spa. In 2023, I won races. The difference is the ability to adapt even when the car doesn't meet your expectations. Sainz then explained how he instinctively prefers a stable single-seater. His natural driving produces a lot of oversteer, and this is amplified with a too-reactive front. With a stable car, I can go fast right away. A nervous car takes me longer, but I still reach the destination. It happened with the 2022 Ferrari. Initially, it was contrary to my style, but I ultimately made the most of it. And this, I believe, is the most concrete proof of how much a driver can grow. Among the cars he appreciated most in his career, Sainz fondly mentioned the McLaren he debuted with in 2019 and the 2021 Ferrari. In both cases, the connection was immediate. But for this very reason, he considers it an added value to have been able to perform even with single-seaters that are more difficult to interpret. While Hamilton is still looking for balance with his new Ferrari, Sainz's message is clear. Adaptation is a technical and mental journey that cannot be ignored. And if even a champion like Lewis takes time, then perhaps it's the system itself that needs to recalibrate expectations. Lewis Hamilton's 2025 season debut with Ferrari is turning out to be far more challenging than expected. After 12 years at Mercedes and 6 world titles won with the Brackley team, the 7-time world champion now finds himself facing one of the most delicate moments of his career. The adaptation has a completely different technical and organizational context. Net of the victory in the sprint in China and the podium in Miami, always in sprint format, the results in the main races have been disappointing, with Leclerc consistently more incisive and a feeling never really developed with the Scuderia Ferrari 25. In the recent Spanish Grand Prix, Hamilton started ahead of Leclerc, but was given the team order to let him pass, highlighting once again a fluid internal hierarchy, but in fact unfavorable to the Englishman. His radio communications increasingly tense with engineer Riccardo Adami, and public statements steeped in frustration have highlighted a discomfort that goes beyond the simple problem of adaptation. The transition from absolute team leader to a figure in search of technical and environmental balance is never easy, not even for a 7-time world champion. David Coulthard, former boxmate of Mika Häkkinen and McLaren driver for much of his career, commented on the situation with clarity during an appearance on Channel 4. The Scotsman acknowledged all the difficulties Hamilton encountered in his first year in Red, but also identified positive signs in his performance in Barcelona. He lacked pace initially, but matched Leclerc's times midway through the race. It was there that he seemed to finally be gaining some confidence with the car. For Coulthard, the problem is related to an ongoing adaptation process, which has been made more difficult. From transitioning from an extremely structured environment like Mercedes to a more complex one like Ferrari. He said he's currently stunned by the difficulties, but sees margins for improvement. He's not entirely in sync, just seeking a balance he hasn't found yet in a championship where every detail counts. Hamilton will have to not only adapt to a car that doesn't respond to his natural style, but also recalibrate his role within the team. The Scuderia Ferrari 25, with its structural limitations and intermittent competitiveness, is not the perfect weapon. But if he can find the right feeling and better integrate his technical contribution into development, the potential to reverse the trend exists. The key will be time, and in Formula 1 time is never too much. The Spanish Grand Prix confirmed a bitter truth for Ferrari. The TD 018 directive on flexible wings has not changed anything. In Maranello, they were hoping for a more significant impact, with the illusion that the new coefficient of aeroelasticity could limit the performance of McLaren. But the track has given another verdict. The walking team has never really feared this regulation. Andrea Stella had previously hinted at it in Barcelona. McLaren had tested the new configuration since Imola, collecting precise data with internal tests and on the track. According to him, if they had mounted the updated specification without Norris's knowledge, the driver wouldn't have even noticed the difference. A clear signal, the performance impact was practically null. The numerical analysis confirmed that the variation between the old and the new specification was close to zero. This scientific approach, as predictive, has rewarded McLaren, who continued to dominate even in Barcelona. The adjustments on the wings, although visible, did not alter the overall balance of the MCL39. On the contrary, the Ferrari found itself in difficulty with more unstable behavior in slow corners and more oversteer in fast corners. Even though technically it brought a new front wing to the track with a more pronounced outwash and a more complex structure in the upper flaps and end plates, a design inspired by Mercedes, the final effect did not impact the result. Leclerc and Hamilton worked side by side in Maranello to analyze the data from the Spanish weekend. The new wing has altered the incoming flow, but the overall balance of the car remains precarious. According to Stella, this situation was entirely predictable. The single-seaters that were already suffering from balance problems like the Ferrari are the ones that have had the most difficulty adapting. It's no coincidence that McLaren, which has spent months studying the TD018, has not only avoided setbacks, but has maintained control of operations on the track. And this is where the real critical point for Maranello opens up, the lack of predictive ability. Ferrari theoretically has the same tools as the competition, but has not been able to anticipate the effects of the new directive. The difference is not in the computational fluid dynamics or test benches, but in the strategic reading and technical interpretation of the regulations. The fact that at Bettoni Inferiore Street they thought of a significant effect of the TD018 is a worrying symptom. Frédéric Vasseur has indicated September as a possible window for a major evolution, but the real risk is that by that point McLaren may have already mortgaged both titles. Hamilton, while contributing to the development, has already suggested seriously considering the 2025 single-seater. Ferrari continues to chase, and the question remains the same. Does it really have the skills to close the technical gap with those who are currently setting the rules? Formula One continues to grow at impressive rates, and the numbers released by United sponsor confirm it. In the two-year period, 2024-2025 investments from sponsors reached $2.04 billion, consolidating Formula One as one of the most attractive sports globally. Only the National Football League managed to do better with $2.49 billion, while Major League Baseball and the NBA respectively stopped at $1.90 and $1.5 billion. The global expansion led by Liberty Media has contributed significantly to this result. By increasing the championship's exposure in key markets and making Formula One much more appealing to major international brands. The teams currently manage 340 active agreements with 319 brands with an average contract value of about $6 million. At the top of the ranking is Mercedes, leading with $550 million collected from sponsors, followed by Ferrari with $450 million, Red Bull at $400 and McLaren at $350. The most significant contracts are Petronas Mercedes at $90 million, Oracle Red Bull at $80, Hewlett-Packard Ferrari at $75, and Ineos Mercedes at $65. The most involved sector is tech, followed by financial services. An interesting chapter concerns the monetization of physical spaces on cars and suits. Placing a sticker on a Formula One airbox can cost between $5.7 and $7.5 million per season. The bellies range from $5.3 to $6.4 million. As for the drivers, a brand that appears on the chest of a suit spends between $1.4 and $1.6 million. On the social front, Lewis Hamilton remains the king of engagement with over 55 million followers. Behind him is Charles Leclerc with 28.8 million and Max Verstappen at 21 million. Also noteworthy is the explosive growth of Oscar Piastri and Liam Lawson, who have seen their social popularity increase by 70% in the last year. Leclerc is the driver with the most personal sponsors, 18, followed by Hamilton and Alonso, both at 16. But the leader for social interactions related to brands is Lando Norris, with over 32.4 million engagements generated, ahead of Leclerc with 29.2 million. The link between sports performance, digital visibility, and economic return has never been so direct. In the new era of Formula One, victories are increasingly being decided off the track as well. Formula One is approaching one of the most radical regulatory revolutions in its history, but the internal contradictions within the system are becoming increasingly evident. One of the main issues concerns the topic of testing. Since private testing was banned in 2009 with the intention of reducing costs and leveling the playing field, Teams have adapted using simulators, CFDs, and stricter limits. But the disguised return of the TPCs test previous cars has reignited the debate. Starting from 2024, teams are authorized to conduct tests with a single-seater, designed according to the regulations of the 3 years prior to the current season. It is possible to drive 2022 cars today. A useful exception to let young drivers run, but teams are exploiting it for much broader purposes. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has tried to put a brake on it, introducing from 2025 a maximum limit of 20 days per team and 1,000 km per driver to be distributed over 4 sessions. But the system remains permeable. These TPCs are not included in the budget cap, as they do not directly affect the performance of the current year's cars. The result is that the teams are multiplying the track sessions with a surge in costs that was intended to be avoided. Alpine and Aston Martin have recently raced at Monza. Ferrari has continued testing at Fiorano. Alternating on the cars are names like Douane, Aeron, Miata, Arthur Leclerc, and Davide Rigon. But how many of these will really debut in Formula 1? In many cases, it's about covered kilometers more useful for development or growth of the drivers. In the meantime, the Pirelli test for the 2025 tires took place in Montmelo on the Monday post-Grand Prix, taking advantage of the weekend's logistics to contain costs. But for other teams, bringing a single-seater to Monza for 3 days has much higher costs. That's why the reflection returns to the point of origin. Wouldn't it be better at this point to reintroduce scheduled, centralized, regulated, and shared collective tests? A limited number of official test days held in Europe after the GPs? It would reduce logistical pressure, allow for economic efficiency, and provide a public showcase for fans. Today, Formula 1 runs the opposite risk of closing in on itself as it prepares for a 2026 full of technical uncertainties. Rumors suggest that next year's first tests will be conducted privately. The concern is real, the fear that the new single-seaters may prove to be unstable, slow, or difficult to develop. Closing everything during this delicate phase is not the answer. Transparency and courage are needed. Liberty Media and Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile should consider the idea of abolishing the TPCs as they are currently structured and replacing them with regulated collective sessions. Not to level the grid, but to ensure a more logical, sustainable, and consistent development process. Because in 2025 there is much more at stake than a new regulatory cycle, the technical credibility of the Premier category is at stake. The Spanish Grand Prix brought back a smile, albeit bitter, to Fernando Alonso in front of his home crowd in Barcelona. The two-time world champion returned to the point zone with a 9th place, breaking a negative streak that lasted 8 races. A small sign of awakening in a so far complex 2025 for Aston Martin. But for Alonso, Spain has always been a land of contrasts, immense joys, and long waits. It was on this very track, in 2013, that he achieved his last victory in Formula 1 at the wheel of a Ferrari. Since then, 12 years have passed. A temporary retirement between 2019 and 2020, 209 races without victories. And a career that at almost 44 years old seems to defy all logic. With 32 victories out of 410 GPs contested from 2001 to today, Alonso remains one of the purest talents of his generation. But that negative streak has pushed him right to Barcelona in 2nd place overall in the drivers' standings, with the most consecutive races without a victory. Having surpassed Andrea de Cesaris, an emblematic figure of Formula 1 in the 80s and 90s, Alonso is now immediately behind Nico Hülkenberg. The Roman in his career from 1980 to 1994 collected 208 races without ever winning, still obtaining a pole position and 5 podiums, including 2 second places with Alfa Romeo in 1983. But the record remains firmly in the hands of Hülkenberg, who has crossed the finish line of 236 races without victories. No wins or podiums, but a memorable pole in Brazil 2010. However, Alonso's path differs. His career has seen very high peaks, world championships won, legendary battles, and team changes that have made him a protagonist in every era of modern Formula 1. The fact that he is still fighting for points today testifies to his technical and mental longevity. But at the same time, the lack of successes in the last 12 years raises questions about why such a talent has not been able to win anymore. Poor decisions, subpar teams, and misfortune likely combine to cause this. Meanwhile, Barcelona gave Alonso a standing ovation for his return to the points. But also a bitter statistic that tells better than any word how difficult it is, even for the best, to return to the top. And now the question remains, will victory number 33 ever come? If you liked the video, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss out. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for more. See you next time.